This is BBC News. I'm Vicky Young. The headlines at 11. A car ferry has crashed into 2 yachts and run aground on the Isle of Wight. The Red Falcon hit the boats in heavy fog while trying to berth at Cowes Harbour this morning. A large search and rescue operation is underway after an Isle of Wight car ferry hit at least 2 yachts while trying to dock at East Cowes in heavy fog. The vessel Red Falcon, which was travelling from Southampton, has run aground at the entrance to the harbour. The 56 people aboard the ferry are all said to be safe. Lifeboats from Cowes and Colshot are helping the operation. Weather conditions have now improved. The BBC's Debbie Moyes is on the Isle of Wight now and has more for us. And Debbie, what was the first you heard about this, and what are people there saying about how this might have happened?
Well, as you're joining me now, they've just pulled the ferry off the sandbank where it's been stuck since about 7 o'clock this morning. It came in from Southampton into Cowes and seems to have ended up in completely the wrong place. Instead of being nearer West Cowes, it's come nearer the Esplanade in East Cowes, just a couple of 100 yards off the beach. There were about 56 people, I think, on board, and as the ferry came in, it came into where a lot of yachts are moored, and it seems that it's hit at least a couple of yachts. One of them been able to see just the mast from the water, so there may well be injuries because people did report hearing cries from the water. So as you say, lifeboats from around the island have attended, and there's Coastguards from around the island. A tug has just been deployed and has pulled the ferry off the sandbank into the port, where the people that have been there since at least 7 o'clock this morning will be able to get off. I just heard the captain say that they would be off in about 5 or 10 minutes. The queues, of course, for the ferries that go hourly are quite long, so East Cowes is pretty blocked up. And there seems to be still a bit of a search and rescue operation going on. The fog has now lifted. It's still out across the Solent, but is lifting now. You can see ships beginning to return to normality, but all the yachts that weren't damaged have been moved away from the area.
And Debbie, we're just seeing now pictures of the tug there pulling the ferry where it had grounded, obviously pulling it away from that area. It does look like the weather conditions are now much better, but presumably earlier the fog must have been pretty bad for the ferry to have gone off route so badly.
Yeah, people here don't really seem to understand what's happened. I haven't had a chance to go around to talk to the officials yet, but there is a sea wall and a bank of shingle which go right out into the entrance to the port. So the ferry seems to have come right around there and towards East Cowes Beach, which a lot of people can't really understand how that's happened. It was extremely thick fog. The foghorn was going from quite early this morning, and the weather is very still. It's been a beautiful weekend, so there would have been a lot of people using the harbour overnight. So I will walk around and see what's actually happened according to the Coastguard, but at the moment it's just people who are here watching, local people that have been giving us their expertise. And
I mean, you use the ferries, the transport there across to the other side quite a lot. Does this kind of thing happen very often, or is this a highly unusual moment?
Highly unusual. We did have, I think it was last year, a container ship got stuck on a sandbank, but that was further out towards West Cowes. It had just taken the turnaround into the channel too late, I think, and got stuck on a sandbank. But what's happened today I don't think has ever happened, as far as I'm aware.
OK, the BBC's Debbie Moyes there on the Isle of Wight. Thank you very much indeed for that update from the scene. I'm going to bring in Andy Moore now, our news correspondent. We were seeing there a picture of how this seems to have happened. Is there any more information about the search and rescue operation, which I think was hampered originally by the weather conditions?
The search and rescue operation is going on. The big unresolved question is whether there are people in the water to be rescued. These shouts that were heard may have come from people on the ferry. We just don't know. I've seen images of the yacht that Debbie was talking about with just the mast sticking out of the water. So it seems that at least one vessel has been sunk. The big question is whether anybody was on board. And I think the rescue services at the moment are just working on the assumption that there might be people in the water until they can clarify the confusion. Just to add, we have had a statement from Red Funnel. They say the 7 o'clock ferry was in contact with several small yachts. The Maritime Coastguard Agency talked about 2. Red Funnel talk about contact with several small yachts whilst entering the harbour. They say the vessel is currently aground. We saw it being towed off. And it says there are no reports of any injuries to anyone who was involved in the incident. Whether they're talking about just on board their own ferry or in a wider context, we just don't know. And just to add to that question you're asking about similar incidents, we do know that there was an incident last month involving a Red Funnel ferry. This was the Red Eagle. And as it was coming into Cowes in similar conditions in fog, it was involved with what it was called a light collision with a yacht. No one was injured on the ferry, which remained in service. I'm just reading from a statement put out at the time by Red Funnel. So in that incident last month, in fog, a very light contact with a small yacht, nobody injured, but there have been previous incidents.
And I mean, it would seem that in the same way as aeroplanes are sometimes grounded for the reasons of fog, you would think they must have known that the weather was going to be like this. It seems slightly strange maybe that they didn't decide to hold off for a couple of hours in this journey.
I don't know the details of the operating procedures for ferries like this. They do obviously have radar, so they can operate in very limited visibility. Whether this surprised them, how dense the fog was, some witnesses said you couldn't see 5 metres, so it may have been even denser than they believed it would be. I just don't know.
Okay, Andy Moore, thank you very much for that update. Earlier we spoke to Gwen, who is staying by the harbour and witnessed the incident.
I was with my husband and the dog, and we were just walking along the seawall, and it was an incredibly thick fog. You could see maximum 5 metres in front of you. And I heard shouting and a sort of clanging, like a metallic clanging sound, and then nothing. But the fog was very disorienting. You couldn't tell which direction the noise was coming from or how far away it was. And then within half an hour, by the time we walked back, we saw the Red Funnel ferry. It's maybe 50 metres, it's sort of swimming distance away from the harbour. And then the fog came down again, even thicker, and then you couldn't see it anymore. Right now, the sun's come out. It's a blazing hot sunny day. There's about 200 people lined up watching what's going on. Everyone's got their cameras out. There's a couple of lifeboats circling, but I think they're just here to provide reassurance. And all you can see of the wreckage is this huge mast sticking out off the water among a row of yachts which are moored and don't appear to have anybody on board.
And Gwen, we are seeing here a picture from the maritime traffic, which shows what's been going on there. And we can see actually the map there showing the ferry, which is obviously run aground, as you said, not far from the harbour, really. So we have been told by the Maritime and Coastguard Agency that I think the 56 people who are on board there are safe and well, but there has been an extensive search. Obviously, the problem might well be with the yachts that they are seen to have collided with, and we're also seeing library pictures there of the Red Funnel ferry. What signs did you see, Gwen, of the rescue operation, or was it very hard to see anything given the fog?
You couldn't really see anything because of the fog. That's absolutely right. Yeah, it was unbelievably thick. You know, you couldn't even see the ferry at some points. You know, there's a lot of speculation. Everyone's talking about it up and down the harbour wall. But other than the announcements actually made to the people on board the ferry, which we can hear loud and clear, you know, saying they're trying to keep people informed, but yeah, there's nothing really more concrete than that.
And have people there been, presumably they have been talking about this, have there been have they been expressing their concerns that this has happened?
Oh, yeah, completely. But I think it's once the fog lifted, it's very clear that the ferry is not in a place where it would normally be. So it's very easy to say now, look, you know, it's very easy to see what's gone wrong, how it's come through a line of yachts when it really shouldn't have done.
And we'll bring you any more on that story as it happens this morning. The Coastguard says no one has been injured after a car ferry hit at least 2 yachts while trying to dock in heavy fog at East Cowes on the Isle of Wight. A large search and rescue operation was carried out after the vessel Red Falcon, which was travelling from Southampton, ran aground at the entrance to the harbour. All 56 people aboard the ferry and the occupants of the yachts are safe, and the vessel has now been refloated. Well, Debbie Moyes joins us now from the Isle of Wight. And Debbie, the weather there looks pretty pleasant now, but clearly the fog caused a lot of problems earlier.
Yes, there was very thick fog from very early this morning. So I heard one eyewitness say that they couldn't see more than 5 metres in front of them when they were just walking along the esplanade. The ferry had come across, it was the 7:30 from Southampton, coming into East Cowes just after 8 o'clock. And it appeared to have veered off towards East Cowes from the main route, which comes towards Cowes Town and then over to East Cowes. But it seems to have veered off towards the esplanade at East Cowes and landed up on a sort of a sandbank in low tide inside the sea wall and the sandbank where it was, of course, stranded. Yes, there were reports that it hit a couple of yachts as it came in, and there were reports of cries and shouts for help. But after extensive search by the Coastguard and the lifeboats, it seems that they might have been people trying to alert authorities that something had happened, or at least the people on the ferry that something had happened. So they've called off the search as far as I know at the moment. The Falcon was refloated about 11 o'clock by a tug and brought into port at East Cowes, where it's now here behind me. They are still meeting with the Coastguard and the police, etc., and the ferry authorities to see what they're going to do. I've heard that they probably will take it out of port empty and try and bring in another boat into service to deal with all the people that are waiting here now to cross. That's not been confirmed if there will be any further crossings yet, as far as I know.
And Debbie, presumably people there you've been speaking to who use this ferry and other forms of transport between those 2 places all the time, are they concerned that this has happened?
Yes, I've heard that there was an incident a few weeks ago where this same boat clipped another yacht, and somebody who lives nearby said that there had been another incident earlier this year as well. So locals were speculating about the navigational system on this particular ferry, but of course there's going to be a big investigation into what happened. It was extremely poor conditions for the ferry crossing last night, but they have radar, but the reports were that it veered suddenly towards East Cowes, so we're not clear yet what's happened.
OK, Debbie Moyes there, live in the Isle of Wight with the latest from the scene. Thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon. A ferry has hit at least 2 yachts while trying to dock at Cowes Harbour on the Isle of Wight. The Red Funnel-operated vessel with 56 people on board ran aground at the entrance to the harbour in heavy fog. The Coastguard said that no one has been injured and the ferry has been refloated. Andy Moore reports.
Mid-morning, after the fog had lifted, the Red Falcon was towed from the spot where it went aground back into harbour. All 56 people on board were said to be safe and well. But further out, in the middle of this image, you can just about see the mast of a yacht that sank in the collision. The ferry hit several vessels and shouts for help were heard.
It was an incredibly thick fog. You could see maximum 5 metres in front of you. And I heard shouting and a sort of clanging, like a metallic clanging sound, and then nothing.
Later, the Coastguard said the sound of shouting was somebody raising the alarm, but at the time there were fears several people might have been thrown into the water. A major search was launched involving 3 lifeboats. A Coastguard helicopter had to turn back because of the poor visibility. As the ferry finally came into port, Red Funnel said it wanted to apologise for any disruption. Last month, another of the company's vessels was involved in a similar incident in fog in Cowes Harbour, but on that occasion there was only what was called light contact with the yacht. Andy Moore, BBC News.
This is BBC News. I'm Anita McVeigh. The headlines at 3. The Coastguard says that everyone has been accounted for after an Isle of Wight car ferry hit at least 2 yachts while trying to dock at Cowes in heavy fog. A ferry has hit at least 2 yachts while trying to dock at Cowes Harbour on the Isle of Wight. The Red Funnel operated vessel with 56 people on board ran aground at the entrance to the harbour in heavy fog. The Coastguard said that no one has been injured and that the ferry has been refloated. The ferry company has since apologised to the yacht owners. Andy Moore reports.
Mid-morning, after the fog had lifted, the Red Falcon was towed from the spot where it went aground back into harbour. All 56 people on board were said to be safe and well. But further out, in the middle of this image, you can just about see the mast of a yacht that sank in the collision. The ferry hit several vessels and shouts for help were heard.
It was an incredibly thick fog. You could see maximum 5 metres in front of you. And I heard shouting and a sort of clanging, like a metallic clanging sound, and then nothing.
Later, the Coastguard said the sound of shouting was somebody raising the alarm. But at the time, there were fears several people might have been thrown into the water. A major search was launched involving 3 lifeboats. A Coastguard helicopter had to turn back because of the poor visibility. As the ferry finally came into port, Red Funnel said it wanted to apologise for any disruption. Last month, another of the company's vessels was involved in a similar incident in fog in Cowes Harbour, but on that occasion there was only what was called light contact with the yacht. Andy Moore, BBC News.
And our reporter Matt Graveling has sent us this update from Cowes Harbour.
Some of these cars currently being loaded on to Red Osprey have been waiting here in Cowes for as much as 6 hours. And that delay was caused when the previous ferry, Red Falcon, ran aground at around 8 o'clock this morning. It happened in amongst dense fog, and the Coastguard and rescue search team immediately went out because they were told they'd heard cries for help in the water. They later told me that it turns out there were no casualties, but on the way to its grounding, the ferry did hit a boat called Greylag, a private vessel owned by a man called Nigel Minchin. It's now at the bottom of the water and its mast is visible just above it. He told me it's a very emotional day. He's owned that boat since the 1970s. As you can see, cars continue to be loaded on to the ferry here behind me. These are the people that were hoping to catch the 8:30 to Southampton. Obviously, it's a lot later than that now, and it has caused delays which will continue for the rest of the day.